Meeting of the Community Development Committee to order. While this meeting is being held in person, we are also offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand, but stay seated and we will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name, city of residence of record. Also, be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration office at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. Ms. Folks, please call the roll.
Thomas. Here. Boltinghouse.
Here.
Loudon.
Here.
Ryard. Here. Kring.
Here.
Inman.
Here.
Chosey.
Here.
Davis.
Here.
Our first item of business tonight is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to make a comment now on an item that is not on our agenda tonight? Okay, we'll proceed now with our regular agenda. We do not have any public presentations on the agenda this evening. Our first action item this evening is the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Robin Folks.
Thank you. Draft minutes of the May 3rd Community Development Committee meeting are included for review and acceptance in your packet tonight.
Recommend acceptance.
Consent or regulated?
Next, we will consider an ordinance revising the Mission Municipal Code for land disturbance and right-of-way permits from Celia Duran.
Good evening. Mayor and Council.
No. So I had to be the first one, of course, to try this out. In our Mission Municipal Code, we have our fee schedule that's lists our fees for licenses and permits and services. However, we've also, in our review of the code, we found that all the fees aren't necessarily in the schedule of fees. They can be scattered out throughout the code. And later on this year, staff is working on updating all the fees. We haven't reviewed those or increased those for a while. So we really want to come back to you with something that really reflects the services we're providing and that's kind of in line with what other cities are providing. So as part of that review, we noticed that there was not a land disturbance permit fee existing in the schedule of fees or a right-of-way permit. These are fees that were developed a long time ago, but we wanted to get them in the fees. So we're recommending revising the code with an ordinance to include the land disturbance permit fee of $250 and right-of-way permit fee of $75. And when we come back to upgrade these fees and recommend increasing, we will probably really revise the right-of-way permit fee and potentially the land disturbance because we want to reflect the services we're providing. So a street degradation fee, a fee if you don't get a permit or a double inspection fee. And there's talk about per parcel. So anyway, that's our recommendation and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yes.
What, who pays the fees? Basically, if, for instance, we're doing street work and we're asking for easements for our project, who pays that fee?
The easement fee or the easements, typically if we're on the street, we ask those for donations since it's benefiting the citizen. And that's really been our experience is that we've received free donations for our easements. As far as permit fees, the developers pay that and the utility companies pay these fees.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? How do we want to
I recommend we take this to council and take it. I don't know if you want it on consent. Do you want it on consent?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, consent.
Thank you.
Next, we have consideration of a contract for biennial bridge inspection work with George Butler and Associates from Brent Morton.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna hand out our inspection rating for 19 and 2021, just so you guys have something to reference. So this is our biannual bridge inspection. This is a KDOT requirement to inspect any bridges over the 20 feet of length within our jurisdiction. We've used GBA for this probably in the past 10 or 12 years. They are pre-certified through KDOT to do this inspection work. So you have to have somebody that's certified through KDOT to inspect your bridges, because it all goes to their portal for their information and track, you know, where your bridge is at or when they get to that failure point or need some kind of rehab work. We have 9 bridges within our jurisdiction that are over 20 feet. The contract includes an on-site bridge inspection, entering the inspection reports into the KDOT portal, which they have access to, preparing a report and a summary of conditions. They also have some maintenance recommendations to try to extend the life of our bridges. And they'll do some cost estimating or high-end cost estimating. So it can come anywhere from clearing out a creek channel to repairs to a wing wall to actually repairs to the bridge deck itself. And any questions KDOT might have, it's within our contract that they have to follow up and answer those questions with KDOT. The condition rating is a 0 from 9 scale, and that's the structural condition of the bridges. So it's the superstructure, substructure, the culvert, and the channel itself. So each bridge gets a rating 0 to 9. 9 is a brand new bridge, 0 is a failed bridge. The sheet I handed out before, our bridges haven't changed in the last 4 to 6 years. Basically, bridges are built for a 75-year lifespan, so you really don't see any degradation, usually in like 10-year increments or 15-year increments. And usually when they hit a 5 or 6, there's some maintenance recommendations that will be provided where to get that bridge back up to level or get it on a replacement list so you can start getting the funds together for it. We have 9 bridges. We have Outlook over Rock Creek, Reeds Drive over Rock Creek, Knoll Avenue over Rock Creek, Martway over Rock Creek East, Roland Drive over Rock Creek, Rowe Avenue over Rock Creek, Lamar over Rock Creek, Johnson Drive over Turkey Creek, and Martway and Woodson over Rock Creek. So we're recommending an agreement with GBA not to exceed 11,900 for the annual bridge inspection. Be happy to answer any questions.
Debbie?
I've asked this in the past. Have we negotiated any inspection costs with the unified government because one of the bridges connects with the unified government
Which bridge would that be?
over Lamar?
So from my understanding, that's in our jurisdiction and our bridge. I didn't know we had any connection with the unified government on that bridge.
We've had an issue years, probably 10 years ago, we had an issue and something needed to be replaced and Mission paid 100% of the cost. Laura, you might recollect exactly what that entailed, but it seemed like unified government, that you can't get across the bridge without it going to unified government. And I just need to understand if they have any responsibility for the bridge as we do.
My understanding is now that they don't have any responsibility for that bridge crossing Rock Creek to get to the
They
highway.
have historically not been willing to purchase. I believe,
Microphone.
so I think it was more, it actually happened prior to my arrival here, which has been 18 years now. But I think there was there was a significant federal grant that was secured to aid in a portion of that. But I think
as I've understood it historically, there was a lot of conversation leading up to that bridge replacement in which
They refuse.
they refused to participate. So no, we haven't approached them about the ongoing inspection and maintenance of that. But I think I know we've talked about future replacement of that and some of the conversations that we've had in various meetings as we look at the federal dollars that are available again. And talking about trying to re-engage them in that discussion.
Okay, well, if the inspection lies on Mission, if we have to do replacement or any part of the bridge, I honestly think we need to at least call them and let them know, because you can't get from one part to another without
Yeah.
them.
Totally understand.
Thanks.
Brent, the Reed's Bridge over Rock Creek that was rated as a 5, we've done work on that, right?
Yes,
So that should be improved this time around.
So I'm not sure. We did very minimal repairs to just some of the storm drains on the bridge and just some kind of asphalt patch and some scaling underneath. So I think it's more gonna keep the rating the same, and it'll help it from degrading farther and dropping in the rating. And that bridge is also, our worst one, and it's in the PPS study we're doing now. So
Okay.
if we get through that, that would be on the replacement through that study.
Okay. And on your list that you just headed out, you said Lamar over Turkey Creek. And I think here it's saying Lamar over Rock Creek, which,
Turkey Creek, I think I
Turkey
might have
Creek.
made a typo.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I would recommend we take this to consent. I agree.
Thank you very much.
Our next action item tonight is consideration of a traffic signal buyout at the intersection of Foxridge Drive and Lamar from Cecilia Duran.
So as you know, the Foxridge Drive project is underway, and part of that includes traffic signal replacement. And in February, at the city council meeting, the council approved purchasing equipment for a new traffic signal. And there was a 30-week lead time, so that equipment should come in September to be installed. So as part of this project, we'd like to replace the signal and buy out the existing signal from Evergy. So part of that process would be asking them for the useful life, and that they've calculated, obviously it's an old signal because the total cost for buyout is $34,816.54. And we really think there's a benefit for the city to own and maintain our own signals, and we're slowly doing that over time. For example, the license plate readers, that's not allowed to be put on an Evergy signal. So when we install our signal, we can put it on. And we feel like there's, as far as managing an operation, there's a benefit as well as cost. So this would be seamless. So what would happen is that our contractor would install our equipment right next to existing equipment. Then we would contact Evergy. They would have a couple days to come out and remove those, and then we'd immediately have our signal operational. So that intersection will stay functional. So I would be happy to answer any questions about the buyout.
Is the maintenance of those lights the same by a same company, or how, in other words, would we call essentially the same organization to?
So if it's our signal, we call Total Electric. If it's Evergy's signal, they used to do their own and now they call Capital Electric.
Okay.
So, and just to let you know, I forgot to mention, I don't know, do you have another question?
No.
Okay, sorry. Right now, we calculated that we own 7 signals plus 3 pedestrian lights, and Evergy owns 18 signals plus 7 pedestrian or school crossing lights. So that's the balance.
I recommend we take this to consent as well.
And that buyout cost was factored into the project budget. So it's not in addition to the budget that's been approved.
Correct.
And a
Thank
portion of that, I think the action item said, but is paid because it's a CARS project, we recover some of that buyout cost as well.
Great.
Next, we will consider replacement of the outdoor shade systems at the Mission Family Aquatic Center from Penn Alimony.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The outdoor shade canopies at the Mission Family Aquatic Center were originally installed in 2014. And their useful life typically spans anywhere from 5 to 7 years, but through a good preventive maintenance program, seasonal setup and takedown, we've been able to extend that to 10 years, including this season. So we're pleased with that effort, but unfortunately they've hit their useful end. And we've reached out to several vendors to bid on 12 individual shade canopy replacements. So we heard from Shade and Net Shade Systems, Inc., who is the original manufacturer, USA Shade, and then KC Tent and Awning, which is a local vendor who actually installs our legacy shade system. So there's a wide variation in the bid amounts that we received. The original manufacturer came in at $42,033, and the lowest bid was $11,600. So you can imagine our concern and, you know, some of the question marks and why we did some follow-up with some of these vendors and asked why the price difference, manufacturer delays. You know, Shade Systems Inc. is in the business of producing once. They don't want to be necessarily a replacement company, so they put all their eggs in the initial installation. But Shade and Net prides themselves on a low-cost alternative. We dug into the comparable elements such as UV rating, fabric density, and lifetime use, and they hit the same standards as Shade Systems Inc. So staff is recommending contracting and purchasing from Shade and Net Systems for an amount not to exceed $11,600 for the shade canopy replacement. And that was originally approved by council last year's capital improvement project budget for $15,000. So we're looking at a savings of $3,400, and that money will become from Parks and Recreation sales tax revenues. I'm happy to answer any questions.
And
Have you had any other cities that use this Shade and Net in terms of their quality of product and so forth?
No, so we reached out to Roland Park, did not hear back, and Miriam is in Shade Systems Inc. territory. So they've got the brand new product in there.
Okay, so we don't know.
Yeah, they're the first time in this region.
Okay, and this would be installed after this season, is that correct?
Correct. So we would purchase this year and they put them together this summer, and then we install them as part of the 2024
Okay.
MFAC opening.
I noticed that at least one frame on the underside is rusting. Is that something that we would do internally?
Yeah, so anytime you see rust, that's probably due to the power coating failure. And so we would have to bid that once it hits a crucial decision point. We've noticed a few of those kind of rearing their ugly heads.
Right.
And so we haven't gotten to the point where we feel the system is at risk of failure though. But
Okay.
similar to like the stairs to the diving boards, we would reach out to a vendor who would sandblast it and then either powder coat it or put some kind of zinc oxide coating on it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
yes.
I recommend we take this to council consent.
Thanks.
Our sixth and seventh action items tonight will be consideration of the repeal and termination of special use permits to operate microbreweries issued to Sandhills Brewing and Rock Creek Brewing from Brian Scott.
Okay, thank you. Yep, these are kind of essentially two items. They do the same thing, so I'm going to treat them as a combination package. You'll recall back in December, we amended the zoning code as it relates to MS1 and how we treat drinking establishments and the requirement for special use permits. And that act essentially made the special use permits that we had issued for both Rock Creek Brewing and Sandhills Brewing null and void. So this is kind of a formality. So we just take them off our books. We like to go ahead and repeal and terminate both those special use permits. And that's what each of the items for 6 and 7 do. So pretty short and sweet.
Question?
Recommend we take both of these to consent.
Our final action item for tonight will be consideration of the cardboard recycling bins for the downtown business district, also from Brian Scott.
Okay, we were recently approached by Jenny Pugh of Lulu's Boutique. It's kind of a representative of the Downtown Mission Merchants Association about the possibility of placing cardboard recycling bins at various strategic locations in the downtown business district. We discussed this with GFL, our solid waste service provider, and they're willing to do that for $125 per bin per month at 6 locations in the downtown area. So that would be a grand total of $9,000 a year. And let me give you a list of. We've been driving around downtown, kind of looking at some possible locations. And tentatively what we're looking at is 5301 Johnson Drive, which is a Mission Mart shopping center. The 5800 block of Johnson Drive, kind of behind the new Casey's General Store. The 5900 block of Johnson Drive, which would be behind the Mission Theater. The 6200 block of Mission Drive, which would be behind the GoPeg Go store. The 6000 block of Johnson Drive, which would be behind the dance studio, the Irish Dance Studio. And then 5860 Beverly, which would be behind the Rock Creek Brewery. These would essentially be kind of the giant 8 cubic yard recycling, the trash bins, but just solely for cardboard recycling. So they have a slit in the middle. People have to kind of break down the boxes, put it through the slit. The top would be locked. And then they'd be probably serviced about once or twice a week, or every 2 weeks or so during the month. So we'll provide some informational material. This is acceptable to you all. It's kind of on a pilot basis. So we kind of want to do a dry run, see how it goes for a year or so. But we'll put together a real nice map, put that on our website, send that out to all the businesses in the downtown area, letting them know this is available. So, any questions?
Ken?
I think this is a good idea. It's also something that is consistent with our sustainability interests. I just hope that we can police those and make sure that they're being used appropriately. But I think piloting is a good way to go.
Yeah, this kind of the design of it. You're not going to get a lot of foreign trash or anything like that. It's mostly cardboard. And I should say we're getting a lot of heavy use right now with the one recycling bin that we do have at the community center. That's getting filled up at least once a week. And when we kind of look through that, we find that a lot of it is from the businesses in the downtown area. So this kind of helps alleviate some of that. So,
Okay. I'd recommend. Go ahead.
Quick question. What will the bins be made out of?
they're metal. I mean, it's
Or
the
metal?
it's typical metal dumpster type. Yeah.
Okay, and I might recommend that maybe the next Mission magazine that we have, even though it's not going to be for another, month and a half, we have some article in there letting businesses know that
Mhm.
those exist, so they know where to put stuff.
Yeah. Once we get everything established, we'll do a pretty extensive marketing campaign and yeah, an article in the Mission magazine's not a bad idea.
Thank you.
Have we found that the appropriate things are being thrown away in the recycle bin at Sylvester Powell?
I think for the most part, yeah, we get some foreign trash in there, primarily from the folks at, I think it's Mission Square, but we've talked to the ownership about that. They've kind of put the word out with their residents there. But yeah, for the most part, it is cardboard. So.
Recommend we take this to council.
Okay, thank you.
I'd say non-consent, so we could make people aware.
Gonna highlight it a little.
Right.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, that concludes our action items. We have one discussion item this evening, a review of Waterworks Park design from Penn Almoni. Will you introduce this item and representatives from Stantec, who I understand have a presentation for us?
Yes, and I will introduce them in just a moment. But just as a so just as a review, it's hard to believe, but in November of 2019, we began the conceptual redesign of our of 5 major parks here in Mission. And through feedback from individual park stakeholder committee meeting members, Parks Recreation Tree Commission members, and multiple community and public outreach elements, we've kind of solidified great and effective conceptual designs. So this past fall, council approved the capital improvement project of moving forward in 2023 to add restrooms, a pavilion, trail enhancements, as well as playground and parking improvements to Waterworks Park. In conformance with the conceptual design that was shared with the public as closely as the survey data would allow. So that's kind of where we've asked Stantec to join us today. But in 2023, January, we partnered with Stantec. They have since created a survey on site and found some utility conflicts, as well as some grading difficulties that have influenced the final design elements. So they'll detail some of those final design elements in just a moment, but that obviously has impacts on the final engineer cost estimates. And so we're hopeful that after today's discussion, we can get some direction in terms of what council supports and what they don't support. So I want to introduce to you today Jake Stodola, who is the landscape designer for Stantec, as well as Kelly Van Elders, who's the principal at Stantec. And I believe Jake is going to lead us through the slide deck and some of those elements. So I'll turn it over to you.
And if I'm not mistaken, Jake is very familiar with Waterworks Park.
Yes.
Next to it.
Yep, I live just up the street from Waterworks, so it's been a privilege to work on it and looking forward to presenting tonight. All right. So tonight we'll go through the original master plan and some of the key elements, and then we'll go through our proposed concept plan and renderings of what it might look like. And then the shelter and restroom and how it lays out on the site as compared to the master plan. And then end with our sustainability scorecard. So Waterworks Park went through a community-based master plan process, which came up with the park's design you see here. Some of the key elements that we gathered from it were a stronger connection from Rushton Elementary into the surrounding communities, a enhanced trail loop system, and open lawn space. The playground was called to be a multi-level playground with different play zones for different ages and abilities. The shelter and restroom design was supposed to be a contemporary design with the shelter holding 75 students and the restrooms being a year-round restroom with 2 bathrooms, and then enhancing the parking that you see down there. So this is our proposed concept plan, and I'll move from left to right, up, it's from south to north, just to get your bearings. But we're proposing pulling the parking off street. This is going to enhance safety and access. It's also going to give a more prominent front entry arrival to the park. The shelter and the restroom are, as you move right, those are in the same general location as the master plan. And we'll talk about how we came up with the layout for those in the following slides. As you move up the trail, you'll pass the multi-level playground. There's the different play zones for different ages and abilities. And as you continue up the trail to the right, you'll pass the community greeting space. This is where all the trail loops converge. And so it creates a great gathering node for social interaction, as well as a flexible space for any city uses such as art in the park or anything else the city could find. And then as you round the trail loop up and around and back down to the parking, you'll pass a solar charging table where you can charge your electronics. You'll pass benches, new grove of trees, and solar LED lights that will light up the trail from the parking into Rushton Elementary. This is a preliminary rendering of the overall view of what the park could look like. And so you see here, the parking's pulled off the street, which is greatly different than what's out there today, much safer. And then you can see that central trail loop and playground in the middle. This is that community greeting space. And so this is where all those trails converge. There'll be an opportunity for seating, wayfinding signage, and then just that flexible space for however the city could use it. And then this is the northern portion of the park where it's more enhanced trails and open lawn. And then there's the new grove of trees there as well. And so as we started to lay out the master plan onto the site with our improved survey, we started to realize the top left layout you see there is the master plan. You have the restroom on the left in the light blue and the shelter in the dark blue on the right. And as we laid that out, it was tearing out one of the largest and healthiest existing trees on the site. And so we started to come up with a series of studies for how we could lay this out to improve and keep those trees or improve the site as well. So that next study to the right, this still takes out a tree. So we realized this wasn't going to work. We moved on to the next study, which is the bottom left, and we brought the circulation in between the two trees. This creates a better gateway to the park, but we still noticed there was a missing relationship between the playground and the shelter. So we swapped the shelter and the restroom from what the master plan called out. This creates a better synergy between the playground and the shelter. It also gives a nice shaded spill out zone for if the shelter is used, you can use that zone flexibly. And so this is the final design for the layout of the shelter and restroom. And so as you can see, it fits 75 students max. It has the 2 bathrooms and a utility chase. So it'll be available year round. And then it'll be bordered by ornamental trees for the back of the house. So we can screen some of the unpleasant views. This is a preliminary rendering of what the shelter and the restroom would look like. And so one thing to note with this shelter is we have 2 options for the shelter. This is the higher end option of the budget, but it reflects more on the master plan's vision and it relates better to the restroom that we have. And this would be the reduced price shelter. This is a example image. This isn't what exactly it would look like, but this is the general idea of what this off-the-shelf shelter would look like. And so ending on the sustainability scorecard, as we were designing the park, we worked through the sustainability scorecard, and we're pleased to share that we were able to hit a lot of these different key components for sustainability. And so we're really excited to see this park get built and look forward to moving forward.
Brent?
Thanks, Jake.
Yes.
I'm going to touch at all on sort of the more detail on the playground elements. And I know there's not a slide.
That was my question.
Yeah, so some of the playground elements, we partner with Stantec, making sure that we meet the needs of our individuals who've got disabilities, whether they be auditory, visual, physical, any kind of limitation. We want to make sure that all of our play features are accessible to them. And so it's a little bit higher standard than the ADA standard. And so you'll notice in our engineer cost estimates, initially, there was a projection for play amenities, and not all of the all abilities amenities get met with that base number. Whereas if we upgrade, we can guarantee that they do get met. So things like swings, Obviously, we want to have some of the major, it's poured in place rubber, so it's accessibility throughout the entire play area. Let's see if there's.
And the poured in place rubber means it'll be a continuous smooth surface. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no lip or transition. It's a seamless transition from the concrete trail into the rubber surfacing. So there's no limitations or barriers for those that are in wheelchairs or walkers or have any kind of lip to kind of scale to get to the play amenities, which is great. And I think this is probably the best view of the play elements. So at the southern end, close to where the pavilion is, that's where we'd have a couple built-in like ground undulations that use some of the natural grading, and then we'd have to bring in some more infill. And we wanted to have some ability to kind of crawl underneath mounds and change elevation pieces so that's a little bit more interesting and appealing and a little closer to what the community had kind of envisioned as part of the conceptual design. And we won't have the ability to build the slides into the side of the where the storage tanks were. There just wasn't enough of a grade differential in there, and it wasn't worth the influx or infusion of money to kind of bring in that amount of topsoil. So we've brought in a 2 to 5 year old play feature that's got a slide, some accessibility areas, rope predominantly accessibility. And then there's a 5 to 12 year old play feature. And then the swings are at the northern expanse of that play area. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So it sounds like we have swings, a slide, and like some mounds for them to play on.
Yeah, mounds at the southern end. We've got shade structures built into predominantly over the slide, since that's where most of that pain is felt. Yeah, so we want to limit that as much as possible.
And then
Yeah, so I think you would envision two separate structures, if you will. So one's smaller in scale for the 2 to 5 year olds. It incorporates a slide and some other kind of those rope features and climbing and variety, probably some ramp. I don't remember exactly what they look like. And then the larger one as well with slides again. So think kind of playground structures, but sized appropriately for different age groups.
gotcha. I had some more questions, but I'll let Hillary go.
Yeah, I would just, if possible, I know this is just a discussion tonight, but I'd love to see a rendering of the playground, obviously prior to us having full consideration. I think that would be really helpful to see those elements and actually see the design of the playground. It's hard to kind of envision. I am curious because Laura mentioned a structure. So I'm, of course, like putting it where my I'm thinking about Broadmoor, I'm thinking about our park where my kids usually go, like, oh, so one larger structure, one smaller structure with multiple elements, or are you saying like one play feature? I feel like just looking at the cost here, if I'm not mistaken, I think around $113,000 for the playground. That just seems really, honestly, pretty modest to me in terms of the price for all of that. Just
Yeah,
kind of curious.
yes, and that's why we moved away from that, because it really did not meet the needs that we had envisioned for this age group. So when we talk about the 2 to 5 year old play feature, it's smaller in scale. A shorter slide was included. I believe there were 2 different access points, but mostly rope. And so it's kind of hard to describe those without seeing an actual picture, but climbing jungle gym type, interwoven rope pieces. And then there's a space in between them, and the 5 to 12 is significantly bigger with a larger slide. And then it's got multiple access points. There's, I believe, a 2-story high tower built into that element. We wanted some scale to it. So it's a lot larger, but I don't know if you've seen any of the rope elements, but they kind of take on like a spider look. And you can, if you're in a wheelchair or a walker, you can go underneath them, access those points at any of the lower elements. So, but yeah, I've heard that will include something in the future for you to see.
And I think we can share that. I think one thing that we didn't really touch on, so what we wanted to do tonight, so you see kind of those base costs. So originally we had built this project budget at about the $1.5 million level. And we have been working with Stan Tech over the last several months as we've kind of worked through, the actual, there are always changes when you transition from conceptual design to the actual design that you're getting ready to construct. And so some of the grade changes and other things. So you'll see those base prices included in that, and kind of that bottom line there. We're trying to stay as close to that $1.5 million, and that included the $142,000 in their design contract. Now in Mohawk Park, we didn't incorporate the design fees into the actual construction price. So what we wanted to show you and kind of have discussion around this evening is under these blue columns is where we've seen, or where Stan Tech is estimating escalation in cost, just generally, like we're seeing on every project that we've had, as well as some of the things that we think are actually enhancements to the park. So if you kind of then go down to, you have that base bid, and then you see kind of the net adds for the alternates. And so that's an upgraded, Councilmember Thomas, play features from the $113,000 to $298,000. And we'll go through some of these other changes as well. But the conversation is really, we added about $350,000 in some of the ARPA funds to supplement parks, not knowing what we might, want to see or do when we got into the final design. So part of the question is, what's the appetite? Do you want to pull design costs out here? Do we want to add some of that $350,000 to, have these park elements before we then actually move to final design and bidding on that? So that's what's included. So you'll see kind of the differences of what we would recommend in our conversations with Stan Tech in terms of upgrading. This is a difficult park to phase. I mean, we kind of talked about phasing options, but it's really small enough in scale and size that I think if we can get in there and do it once, just the elements don't lend themselves particularly well to phasing. But so Penn can kind of touch on some of those other alternates as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and a big consideration was all of the youth that are around construction areas. We just wanted to limit that entirely. So I think that's been documented as fully supported. But wanted to talk about the parking in particular. This was the most drastic difference from our conceptual layout into the final design. And this was actually the shared vision of Stan Tech as they came in with their best practices and shared this with us during the interview process, which I think helped build some confidence in their willingness to think a little bit differently than us and to make sure that they're considering all best practices, not just what we envisioned as best practices. And so they've really shared with us some of the benefits. Obviously, that comes with a significant price increase of $60,000. But I think when we circulated this through the leadership team, it meets a lot of the needs of the community. It's got a safety element, brings them off the street. We've notoriously had traffic jams in this area, so it prevents people from needing to back into an active roadway. Obviously, a lot more children and pickup that accommodates multiple drop-off pickup points and individuals simultaneously. So that just moves the needle and makes it a little bit more seamless at that point. So that's the one element. The playground we had discussed, meeting a higher standard of accessibility drove a lot of this. And one of the things that Jake brought to our attention was moving that pavilion to the left side gives our police the ability to see that playground at all times. which has been great. And so we had talked about kind of keeping that younger age group a little bit closer to the eyes of, the safety patrol. So that's one benefit of the playground changes. The sidewalks, we've recognized that there are some costs associated with 10-foot wide sidewalks. And so that was part of our initial discussion with Stantec, and they probably got tired of me coming back to them and saying, how much can we save if we, shaved off 50 feet? How about if we did 100 feet? And so it eventually got to the point where internally, leadership team feels confident that we need to envision tying in our parks with a broader trail system. And if we want to do that consistently, it's in our best interest to think long-term, like how many people can we bring in if there is a regional connection along, say, the old Strangline Railroad. And so some of that factors into our recommendation to go 10-foot wide concrete. Obviously, that comes with a $50,000 increase. We believe that we reach out to Water One, who has tentatively said they can absorb some of that signage cost and would be happy to kind of cross promote some of their interests with our vision and that signage and kind of create a clear educational piece and absorb some of that 15,000. But then the structure, that the $80,000 one, I've been pleased with Stantec because they've really gone above and beyond any other landscape design firm that I've worked with and reaching out to multiple vendors to find different solutions. This $80,000 one was predominantly wood. You can find different iterations. This one is pretty modular, wood, very basic, limited capacity. So the $100,000 gives us a little bit more capacity to meet the needs of, say, the school teachers coming down and using that as an outdoor teaching space. And then lastly, the BMPs. This site's really unique, but it's a larger vision for Mission to kind of, support green infrastructures and kind of reuse some of the natural rainfall and help utilize that in nurturing, native planting. So there's no direct costs associated with that because there are grant funds out there that we could tie into. There are a myriad of BMP solutions, anywhere from butterfly gardens to full-on rain and bioswale systems that have piping and drainage to the nth degree. And so some of those costs can get pretty high end pretty quickly. So that's why that is left open at this point. But Laura had mentioned it. We've had a lot of increases in construction costs. Stantec estimates that it's been 35% since the initial conceptual design, which would come around $500,000. So 1.5 million and an estimate of about $500,000 more brings us to that $2 million mark. And so we feel like some of these have been really well thought and really pointed. We sharpened our pencil in many instances, and I'm happy to hear your feedback and your recommendations and see what council supports at this point.
I think also we're exploring, I think there are grant opportunities as well for some of the playground structure in particular that we might be able to look at. And again, I think going back to, we're interested in your feedback as we move this through the planning commission and then ultimately to bid documents that we can put out on the street, because as you all know, our goal is to do this work and have the park open at the same time the students come back to Rushton Elementary. So, and again, looking at how we want to treat this, if we treat it similarly to the first phase of Mohawk, and you exclude the design fees from the construction, you're talking about that net add of more in the neighborhood of $56,000 as opposed to the $198,000. So again, just want to kind of hear your reactions to that as we've gotten closer to what we think we can really accomplish on this site as we move to construction.
Yeah, thanks. So I was still confused. So the rain garden is part of the design?
Yeah, yes, we'd like to have some sort of BMP and
What's
In-
BMP? Sorry.
best management practice.
Okay.
But essentially it's, reusing the natural rainfalls and drainage system so that it's not burdening our infrastructure on the streets.
And then the industrial features, are those still part of the design too? It's like all the stuff that was like the zip line and the industrial feature, all of those are still in play.
So I believe we removed the zip line. That's right. Yeah. So the zip line has been removed. It's a higher cost piece.
They also take up a lot of space on the playground.
Okay.
Which requires a lot more surfacing, so it's kind of a escalating cost.
Gotcha.
All that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just going on what's in the packet and those features are still highlighted. So it might be helpful to kind of remove what we decide we aren't gonna do on that. And then the other item I was just gonna ask was, so as far as like maintenance of this goes after and I know we're still talking about the final design. Have you kind of thought of a plan for how we'll, maintain things like the rain garden? And
Mhm.
I think all this stuff's really cool. I just want to make sure we're kind of thinking through what it will look like too after the newness wears off.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's been my primary concern initially with any level of BMP is can we maintain it? Because you've noticed at Broadmoor Park in particular, that's a struggle and that's one location. And we've got 4 of those that we really haven't even jumped into, or 3 additional ones that we haven't jumped into. And so, yeah, that's a big consideration, which is why I believe there's a spectrum of BMPs that I would love to include that don't get in that deep and that, it's not that deep in terms of actual surface level, but then there's less opportunity for overgrowth and those types of things. So, yeah. And to kind of complete the circle, we've got 3 part-timers now. So in terms of maintenance, we feel like we're checking off a lot of the deferred maintenance that the 1 full-timer had missed over the last couple of years. And so I believe we've got the team in place to absorb some of this maintenance piece.
I just want to say that this is, a park that is well used by kids, well used by kids, because it's kind of a meeting place after school. It's right next to Russian. So I really want to make sure that there is plenty for all ages of kids to occupy their time. My 4 kids grew up in that park and some of them are very sad to see it go. But progress is good. So I just want to make sure that there's, it's not just littles, but, everybody has a few things that they can do there. Not just 1 or 2.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the things I didn't mention is that the rope play features have so many different access points. In many ways, it allows more children to participate on it as opposed to some of the decking type of play features that we have currently there.
I have a couple of questions. What's the diameter parameters? What is the size of the park?
4 acres.
4 acres? I have a question, and I never asked you this before, Pam, and I should have. When we have the opportunity for community members to buy trees and put them in parks, the only parks I'm aware of that we've done that with are Legacy Park and Mohawk. Is it an opportunity to do it at any of the other parks?
Absolutely. In fact, we've had people purchase here at Anderson. Waterworks has 3 that were purchased.
Okay.
Broadmoor does too. Yeah.
So there will be room or space for additional trees to be added.
Yeah,
Right.
and that was one of their Stantec's pitches too, is that they're gonna create a tree. What did you call it? Master plan, so that we have a vision of which species should go where and at what locations. And give some residents an opportunity to say, oh yeah, I want lot 33, this species there. So, yeah.
Okay. As we move forward, Broadmoor is a little ways down the line. I want to ensure that there's equity among the parks too. As this one goes up, I want to make sure the others don't go down as they proceed down the path of getting completed.
Yes, and that is our challenge, because obviously we're constrained by funds and my ability to keep all the balls in the air, but I agree wholeheartedly. Our goal is to make sure that each one of our major areas gets the focus and attention they need.
Did you say there was going to be a bioswale with this one or not?
Yeah, so they've got their latest iteration. There's not a bioswale per se, but a BMP to the right of the restrooms. So just east of them.
I would ask that you go look at the one at Broadmoor. I don't think it's
Yeah,
what we
don't
envisioned.
envision
Yeah,
that. So I
that's-
think one of the things that, and Celia, I may ask Celia to jump in. So one of the things as you go through the checklist, there's a specific checklist for any development project. And I'm going to speak out of school, so just jump in. And we haven't completed that entirely, but there are all kinds of options. So it could be native plantings, it could be berming, it could be other kinds of swales. So don't think about the bioswale at Broadmoor that got completely overgrown. We're being very thoughtful and intentional in not recreating that from a maintenance standpoint. And so we want to look at specifically that checklist and then leave the door open to be flexible. In the conceptual design, there was actually some rain garden element in the northwest corner of the park. And one of the very first things that when we renegotiated the lease agreement with Water One is they asked us to please remove that because of a significantly sized transmission line that they have in that area. And they did not want to be responsible for having to come back and replace a more expensive investment in native plantings or rain garden should they need to come in the future to do that. So we have moved some things around in connection, and Water One has been connected to the discussions really throughout the process. And so some of these adjustments have resulted because of the location of their lines or things that they've requested, but we're still exploring those options for what is attractive and accomplishes what we want from a stormwater management standpoint and doesn't burden us from a maintenance standpoint.
Mayor?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think all these alternates make sense. I'm particularly enthusiastic about keeping the trail a uniform size. When I saw some of the earlier iterations, I thought it was kind of odd to have it go like 6 feet, 10 feet, 6 feet,
Yeah.
So I like the 10-foot trail. And I think using the ARPA funds that we set aside, particularly as we knew we were going through these park renovations, makes sense. And there would still be dollars left to put towards Broadmoor, one of our other parks as we continue to move forward. Because definitely hear the piece about equity and making sure the last park redone doesn't kind of get the short end of the stick. But
Ken?
Specifically to your question about the design costs, I think we should be consistent in how we handle this. So if it was excluded from Mohawk, it probably should be excluded in this case and future cases as well.
Ben?
So kind of strange. I know I feel like I'm a bit of a trail guy. I'm going to come out against the full 10-foot option. I don't think it's worth the money. I think 6-foot trails, I've used a lot of trails in a lot of different ways, bikes, strollers, walking. 6 foot is pretty ample. 10-foot is a driveway. I mean, that's big. And even the base bid has 10 foot, at least one path all the way through the park on the drawing here. I definitely get why we would want it if money was free, but it doesn't seem like it's worth the extra 50 grand when we have a whole list of bid alternates here to tack on more price. As a trail user, I'm thrilled to have a 6-foot trail. 10 feet, even for part of the bid, I think is amazing. So that's my thought.
I want to go back to the rain garden thing real quick, because there is a patch there in the park that has for years collected water and ended up a mud hole.
Up in the northwest.
Up in the northwest corner. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So
We'll
that's
deal with that through grading. Yes, well,
Okay.
that's been flagged. You can see Stantec smiling.
Okay.
That's been flagged from the get-go.
You're aware of that. Little ducks go and hang out there. It's kind of cute, but at the same time, everyone's feet get muddy on the way home. So
But that was where we couldn't do the BMP because the infrastructure from Water One that's underneath, right? Yeah.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
we're solving it from through grading
Through
instead
grading.
of that. Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
And
I'd like to come back to what Ben just said. I was wondering if there's an impact in terms of trail maintenance and things like that, or park maintenance where it's beneficial to have a wider pathways for equipment and things of that nature.
Yeah, so from a maintenance perspective, it helps if you need to get bigger vehicles like trucks onto the trail. Because 6 foot, you're running right on the edges and you're guaranteed to crush the edge of the concrete trail at some point. You know, if they've done the underlayment properly, then you can protect against that, but there's always going to be some element that's compromised. So 10 foot kind of protects against that. I also like the ability to not vary in one width versus another in case we are, plowing. Because some of our new team members may go from the 10-foot section and then just carve out a rut in the turf where it gets narrower, similar to, what we've seen in other areas. So just from a preference standpoint, one width is better for us. Yeah.
Sorry, I was gonna jump in just because 10 foot is kind of the standard for a trail. That's what the federal recommend. It's not that you have to be 10 feet, but that is the standard. For example, on our Rock Creek, we had federal funds, they required 10 foot because that's kind of the standard that, there can be passable wheelchairs and pedestrians. So that's kind of the gold standard. It doesn't mean that we have to do it, but that is what everyone recommends. What they call a trail is 10 foot wide.
good to know. Thank you.
And,
Larry?
not to put too fine a point on it, but there is a 10-foot path through the entire park in the base bid. And, I don't know that a park needs to have all trail width sidewalks throughout the whole thing necessarily, just for the money.
Mhm.
Again, if everybody else wants to spend the money, I'm gonna love using them, no doubt, but I don't know that it's worth it to just get every single piece of asphalt or every single piece of concrete, minimum 10 foot.
Hillary.
Thanks. I've got a couple of questions and comments. I do tend to agree with Ben on the trail situation. As long as there's one all the way through that's consistent and little cutoffs that are smaller, that doesn't bother me. Oops. I am all about the alternate bids that improve the playground. I think that should be priority number one. I think we've got so many kids to Leah's point, there's so many kids going through there. I think really prioritizing that to me is very important. But with that said, not being able to see the base, a base rendering and then an alternate rendering makes it a little challenging, the same way that we can look at the base structure and then the alternate structure and say, oh yeah, that structure looks a lot better. That's worth the extra $100,000. I think that would be really helpful, at least for me. If I'm missing a rendering, tell me I'm wrong. That's one first comment. Second one is how tall is the wood fence along the neighbors along Outlook? The wood fence on the east side,
You know that? Yeah.
6 foot. Just wondering if we've had any conversations with neighbors. I know that would be like a natural instinct that they might want them, but surprisingly, I think you might find that some may not. And maybe that's the city's preference, but just something to consider. I know in some of the parks, part of the, beauty of having a home looking, is looking out on a lovely park, but it will be busier than it currently is. So that's my second thing. My third thing relates to, I didn't see anything about the EV charging in the budget, but I noticed that EV charging was highlighted in the sustainability scorecard. So I'm just curious if that's a separate piece that we'll explore later, knowing that there will be some likely other funding opportunities out there for that.
Yeah, so we haven't talked about that in the parking lot. We had talked about it in the restroom, correct? So like a plug-in for EV bicycles. So it's, Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that was brought up in the Sustainability Commission that we consider that, and I believe we can absorb that as part of the power plan that Stantec has devised. So that was why it was included in there.
My last comment, Penn, I haven't said it yet, but this is beautiful, guys. This is beautiful. And thank you. It's very exciting to envision something like this at the park. And I know that the entire neighborhood is really excited. So thank you and great work.
Thank you.
I also want to say thank you for saving the trees that are big, strong and healthy there. That's means a lot to the people in the tree commission and many in the city. Anyone else?
Yeah, I've got a question for you.
Yes.
In regards to Broadmoor Park, I know that we're not talking about that right now, but what is the proposed width of that trail replacement?
10-foot wide concrete.
Okay, thank you.
So like for like. I mean, comparable to Waterworks, that is.
Okay.
Right now it's actually 6-foot asphalt, but we're proposing 10-foot wide concrete at Broadmoor.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And yeah, I will give you, I've been on some of the trails that are 6-foot asphalt around the county and see a park's, Super Duty driving down that thing is a little bit scary.
Yeah.
But again, gonna have that driveway width all the way through the park and just a thought, if we need to save the money. If we don't,
Oh, yeah.
go for everything.
Yeah, I just think if we're thinking about all users, that 10 feet makes a lot more sense from an accessibility point. If you're thinking about wheelchairs trying to pass bicycles, kids on bikes who are zooming around. And also we've talked a lot about, our communities for all ages. And obviously this is the park right by the school. So there's a lot of focus on the kids. But I think as we move through, it's important to think about making the amenities that are for other user groups. We're probably might see some grandparents climbing on the 2-story, rope structure. You never know. But if we're thinking about making other pieces of the park more attractive and user friendly for all groups, then I just really think the 10 feet makes sense.
10.
One more question about the fence. Is there not a fence there now or no?
Chain link.
Yeah, so
Is the chain link individual property owners that have them? So it's all different. Okay, so this would be installed and maintained by the city. Is that correct?
well, yeah, there's no fence. Um,
It's rendering techniques. There's a bunch of stuff behind it, so I just put that there.
Okay, so it's not a city installed fence as part of the park. Okay, thank you.
It is worth noting, though, that we do get some of those residents who reach out to us and ask, for us to, weed eat along or string trim along the park edge and kind of help. So we have done that for those that reach out to us. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to have dogs coming from the backyard into the park.
No.
That would be difficult.
Yeah, and we actually took that in consideration too, making sure that that trailway is as far as possible away from their fence lines. So we've listened to that feedback from residents. You're welcome.
Okay, anything else? Okay, Ms. Smith, are there any department updates for the Community Development Committee?
Penn stay there. I think he had a couple of things to talk about.
I did. I wanted to update you on Mohawk Park. So the latest was that they anticipate completing June 19th. And we are still fingers crossed on a couple of pieces, plumbing in nature. So we hope that they show up. Our picnic tables are in transit. So they will be on site here in the next 10 days, which is pretty exciting. The spray foam insulation's been installed. The decking on the restroom ceiling has been installed. And so now they're ready to finish some of those electrical components inside each individual restroom, which is pretty exciting. I don't know if I updated you on concrete pour. But there were some depressed, there were 4 pads that were depressed. And we noticed them during 3 different rainfalls and had brought them out. When I say them, it's Sands Construction, brought them out during the most recent one. And they've agreed to re-pour each of those sections so that they're even and we're not creating kind of a maintenance nightmare in the future, which is pretty exciting. And they're doing that at their cost, which is wonderful. We've got a pre-bid meeting for Broadmoor Park contractors. That's going to be tomorrow at 3 p.m. at the Powell Community Center. We have movies in the park coming up, not this Friday, but next Friday, June 16th. And that's going to be at our very own Waterworks Park. And one of the greatest movies ever, Minions, Rise of Gru, the origin story. It's pretty funny. And I wanted to update you, since we've had some feedback on MFAC memberships, I wanted to update you on the membership sales at this point. So as of today, we've sold 1,045 individual memberships to the MFAC. And that's just a number unless you compare it to last year's estimate, which at this point last year, we were at roughly 1,100 individuals. So it was 300 and change family memberships. So we're lagging behind last year's, but only by 50 or so individuals. And this year, the last 7 days, we've actually trended up. So we sold 40 more memberships than we did compared to last year, which is exciting. So roughly in terms of revenue, we generated about $8,000 more than we did at this point last year. And it's easier for us to track those that are attending, which is wonderful. And that split is 592 residents to 453 non-residents. So that's higher resident membership sales compared this year compared to last year, which is wonderful. Thank you.
And I had
Yeah.
one quick question. At Mo, when will the not so attractive fence come out? The fence from the old version of the park?
So on 60.
Yeah, like
7?
along 67th and up and.
So on the western portion, that's going to stay in place. We had talked about removing 67th to the very last moment. So
Okay, at the last moment of phase 1 or
phase 1.
Okay,
Yeah. So right now there's a section open right there on the southwest corner and over by the parking lot. And we want them to remove that middle section, tying both in as part of phase 1. The construction fencing was opened up to allow access from the new parking lot into the playground too. So that was something they accommodated for us. Thanks.
And camp has started. If you've been in the community center, the walls are buzzing.
So I'm going to let Brent update you on the street projects, but I wanted to talk to you about the Safe Streets for All grant that we're really interested in applying for. It's a $200,000 grant and our cost would be about $10,000. And what it would be is a comprehensive evaluation of the entire city. So looking at every intersection and looking at it for safety issues. So for example, I get a lot of requests for a flashing pedestrian beacon at 61st and Lamar. I have one for just south of Shawnee Mission Parkway on Knoll. I mean, we have these, I need crosswalks here. I feel unsafe here. I want, more walking here. We'd also be looking at, we receive concerns about the Knoll and Shawnee Mission Parkway because people come down the hill. Now, I don't know if there's a lot to do there, but so what this grant would do would be, there'd be a lot of public engagement and they would go out and evaluate every location in town and make recommendations. So when we do a project, we could also apply for funding for any kind of improvements, but we can incorporate those into the project. So I think it's a really good opportunity, especially for the cost. So I wanted to bring that up and, get your feedback on that. Okay. Thank you. And Brent's going to talk to you about the projects.
Am I good? You want me to wait?
Oh, you're good.
Okay. So street projects and our cars projects have all gotten started. So start with Foxridge. It's down to one-way traffic. They've been clearing and grubbing for the last 2 weeks, just getting the trees and all the debris and some of the guardrail out of the way to get the stormwater crews in. They're hopefully starting either Friday or the first of next week of doing one of the major stormwater crossings down there by Quick Trip. And then they'll just work their way up the hill, except for a mid location. They got to wait on some utilities there and start getting the stormwater work in. Once that's in, we'll start getting into full removals and tearing out the street half at a time. And so traffic should have access the whole time. They'll use plates to get cars through when the stormwater work's going on. So look for a lot more activity down there on Foxridge. They'll be getting started on the majority of the stormwater work here soon. Street projects moving along good. They are actively working on almost every street. Beverly is coming soon. 50th Street in Beverly will probably be into full tear outs in the next 2 weeks. Saw cutting is scheduled for within the next 3 days. And those are two smaller streets and they're kind of separated or farther apart in town. So we're allowing the contractor to demo both of those at the same time. So it really doesn't affect residents parking or anything like that. So we can get people back and get the pavement down. And there's limited stormwater work on those streets as well. So they should move fairly quickly. Riggs is going fairly well. It is a difficult street to construct with being a dead end street and getting this, all the stormwater crossings in. It's kind of at the low end or the sump. So there's bigger pipe and we're just tying into old infrastructure as well, going as far as we can. So it's difficult work. Contractor's been working well with getting steel plates out. There have been some delays where they've got to get concrete or flowable fill in. So cars could have to wait for 10 or 15 minutes till they get it replated and get them through. But once that goes into full demolition, they do have an on-site chauffeur service or shuttle that will shuttle people back and forth with a cell phone. So it's the first year trying that, so we hope it works well. But that's been the most difficult street so far. 61st Terrace is going well. One of the box culverts is 80% constructed. They still got to build the outside walls or the decorative walls where the veneer finish would be. So it's in its cure time right now. And once they get it backfilled next week, they'll start working on those walls. And once we hit our cure time and we can get traffic back on that, we'll gravel it in and then move to the western box culvert and start working on that. Water One has to do some water main work as well once our contractors finish at the east end, but it shouldn't conflict with one another. We try to coordinate all that. So everything's moving along, just a few complaints on Riggs, but I think they'll all be happy when we get done and they got a brand new street and everything's looking good. So be happy to answer any questions.
Debbie, are you still looking the 53rd and Riggs to the north? Are you still looking at October as your timeline for finishing?
Probably so. So they are sticking to their schedule now. So, you know, once we get into the cement treated base and full tear outs, they're estimating like 500 feet a day. I mean, it kind of depends on, you know, what's underground or what we run into. So Riggs has probably been rebuilt 3 times, we're finding. So there's a lot of old infrastructure.
We have so many entities at the same time, all there at the same time. I mean, it's good because you don't want to do replacement later, but it's hard for people to understand. And I want to commend Celia for her response back to the citizen today. It made perfect sense. She was right on target and said, reach out to me if you have other questions. And that was a great response.
So any of these rehab projects, I mean, you're looking at close to 2 years of impacts with utility relocations and then our construction crews coming in. So it's, you know, you try to schedule it where everybody's working, but the utility companies aren't the greatest to work with. Some are better than others. But I mean, you can give them an eight month timeline and they'll show up 2 months before that timeline's about to expire and try to get the work done. So it's difficult to coordinate and they're doing it on their dime so that you don't have as much pressure on the relocation side as you would like. So.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to commend you and Celia both for the work. And I think that the crew is doing a good job. It's been good to watch the project and the progress it's going on. And I know that some people have been difficult, but just call on us if we can be helpful at all. We're certainly willing to help out with the neighborhood.
I appreciate that, Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council and Mayor.
I think that's good. It is now 7:49 PM and with no further discussion, that concludes the meeting of the Community Development Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you.
Yeah, do we want to take a quick break? Maybe a little 3-minute moment? 5 minutes? Oh, yeah. No, we'll reconvene at like
Committee to order. While this meeting is being held in person, we are also offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand, but stay seated and we will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also, be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. Mrs. Folks, please call the roll.
Thomas. Boltinghouse.
Here.
Loudon. Here. Ryard.
Here.
Kring. Here. Inman.
Here.
Josie.
Here.
Davis.
Here.
First, tonight we have a revised agenda for the evening. Ms. Smith, will you please share the proposed agenda changes with us?
Yeah, thank you. Originally, we were scheduled to kind of take our first pass at the general fund budget. I think, as you know, we are still sort of struggling is probably the best word with the vacancy in our budget and finance manager's position to kind of be where we are typically with exchanging information with the auditors and having a confidence level that we felt like, you also know me, I don't like to come in if I don't really know my numbers inside and out. And I didn't feel like we were ready to do that this evening. So we have recommended a revised agenda just to take that item off. We had built lots of time into our annual budget schedule. So this doesn't put us behind in any fashion. And I think we are having a lot of meetings internally with the leadership team, and I think we're close. We'll be ready later this month. I think the mayor and I have been discussing, and we might poll availability for a work session on the 28th of June. We had a work session scheduled already prior to our legislative meeting on the 21st, when we were going to talk about the 5-year CIP. We would still anticipate holding that one. But I think it would probably be good to look at the availability for that work session on the 28th. But that's the recommended change to the agenda this evening.
All right, is there a motion to approve the revised agenda?
Madam Chair, I move the committee approve the June 7th, 2023 Finance and Admin Committee revised agenda as printed.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Ms. Folks, please call the roll.
Davis.
Aye.
Josie.
Aye.
Inman.
Aye.
Kring.
Aye.
Ryard.
Aye.
Loudon.
Aye.
Boltinghouse.
Aye.
Thomas.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We will now proceed with our agenda. Our first item of business is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment now? Okay, seeing none. We have no public presentations this evening, therefore we will now proceed with our regular agenda. Our first action item this evening is the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Robin Folks.
Thank you. Draft minutes of the May 3rd Finance and Administration Committee meeting are included for review and acceptance in your packet tonight.
Recommend acceptance and consent.
Consent. Okay. Our second action item is approval of a franchise agreement with Google Fiber from Laura Smith.
Yes, thank you. So in 2022, Google Fiber began notifying cities of their intent to discontinue their video services, while their intent is still to continue to provide broadband and voice services. Under really since 2013 in our case, and we were one of the first cities to enter into a franchise agreement originally with Google, you may recall. That was done under a statewide video franchise agreement. With the discontinuation of the video services, that state umbrella franchise is no longer valid. And so in order to continue to use the right of way, Google needs to come back and negotiate new agreements under the general franchise statutes that provide utilities with kind of that right of way access. I will tell you that we are, Overland Park, I believe was the first city in Johnson County to negotiate the agreement. The form of the franchise agreement and the terms of the franchise agreement were negotiated kind of by a group of municipal attorneys, including Overland Park, and I believe Prairie Village's city attorney. And so the language is very similar. We are on the tail end, one of the last to kind of get this through the system. They have just been slow to return comments back to us. But so what we've presented this evening is a new ordinance, which would grant a telecommunications franchise to Google Fiber. It would be a reduction in the 5% franchise fee to 2%, which is the rate that has been negotiated with all of the other cities. And then it's very similar in other respects. And then there are a couple of accessory agreements that would a network cooperation and services agreement and a structure attachment and conduit occupancy agreement that also need to be revised as a result of these changes. With the reduction in the franchise fee, it's estimated that the revenues that will be generated at the 2% rate will equal or exceed the current fees that are generated by the current video service fees. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Ben?
So has their state franchise already expired or been revoked, or are they gonna get franchises with all the municipalities before that happens?
No, I think they're, I don't know the answer to that specifically, but I can find that out.
No, just prefer that they didn't fly by night, you know?
Any other comments?
Question. I was just hoping we could get some more information on why 2% was the number landed on. It sounds like that's what other cities went with. And I know the 5% you've explained is from the state statute, but just seeing that reduction, if we could get any more insight on that.
We can, and I apologize. So we had Jacob Turner with Payne and Jones had done that research, and I can ask him to be available on the 21st to provide some additional information on that
Okay,
kind
great.
of that negotiation. So it's at the city's discretion with the other at the 5% rate that we can set. We have flexibility in setting that franchise rate within our city.
Anybody else? Ken?
Just recommend that we.
Oh,
go. You have it?
question, I
Oh,
think.
go ahead.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Just follow up to Solly's, just curious if any other cities deviated from the 2%
No.
or deviated from this agreement in
No.
any other way?
No.
All right, Ken?
Yeah, I recommend that we take this to non-consent.
Okay, we'll put it on the regular agenda and ask for some additional information from Mr. Turner.
All right. Our final action tonight is approval of a CMB license application for natural grocers from Robin Folks.
Thank you. Natural Grocers at 6819 Johnson Drive has submitted a CMB application to sell cereal malt beverage at their store that is already established in Mission. We've done background checks. They filled out the application and have paid the fee. The background checks were all approved. And so now they are in front of you for approval so that we can issue their license. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments?
Recommend we take it to consent.
Thank you.
That concludes our action items. We have no discussion items this evening. Finally, this evening, we have our department updates. Ms. Smith, are there any department updates for the Finance and Administration Committee? Great.
Thank you. We were thinking through the administrative activities of late and just thought perhaps that you might want to hear that this is National Safety Month. And we've been working really hard to amplify safety messaging among our staff in recent years. And we've reinvigorated the safety committee, as I believe you know. Large kudos go to Kathy Stratman, our human resources specialist, whom you don't get to see very often, but who is a really critical member of our team. So we had a safety breakfast on Friday last week and had about 23, I think, staff members attend. And it was kind of a celebration because we've had really good numbers lately and have been really doing a lot of internal peer teaching. And we've seen some of our hardest cases kind of fall off the number. So in terms of financial bottom line numbers, that's looking really strong. But also I think in terms of culture, we're making really good strides. So we heard of, we had a Thomas McGee representative come and speak and just share some reminders and tips and advice, but also kind of share with our staff the behind the scenes reasoning for why we do what we do and how it impacts the finances of the city, but also that our ultimate goal, of course, is that everyone goes home safe and sound. So just a kudos for staff's work.
I had something I was going to say and then I forgot. And must not have been that important. So I'll sit down and, it's like you go back to that doorway. And I'll remember that. But I think Sandra, you had indicated if you had anything to update.
All right, it is now 8:06 PM and with no further discussion, that concludes the meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you.